Hey everybody, we appreciate you taking the time to join us today for Pioneering AI for Local Governments, Meet the Minds Behind BreakGround. My name is Grace Gill. I'm a growth and community consultant with BreakGround. I'm excited to be sitting down with two of the founders of BreakGround this afternoon, Jacob Herrington and Nick Spinazzi. I'll be facilitating a Q&A conversation with the pair about their journey to building Ordinal and creating the BreakGround team. You can also expect to hear their insights for AI in the government sector, learn more about the product Ordinal, and shared success stories from working with city teams. I hope you enjoy engaging with this candid conversation. Before we start, if you're interested in learning more about Ordinal and how it can work for your city, please fill out the contact form in the chat or from this QR code, and a team member will be quick to reach out. Without further ado, welcome Nick and Jacob. Hey Nick, hey Jacob. Thank you guys for joining us today. I think the best way to kind of kick this off is if you guys would just take a couple minutes to kind of give some background on yourselves and maybe how you two met.
Definitely. At a super high level, like the way to get through it really quick, because we do have a little bit of history as co-founders, but we worked previously for an entrepreneur in Northwest Arkansas named John James. He has a number of kind of successful and not so successful ventures like most startup founders, and we were part of one of them that we got pretty far, but we ended up actually kind of closing shop up just because funding ran short. But it was a really good experience. We learned a lot. I got really into open source through that. John gave me a lot of opportunities to dig into those things. And Nick actually started experimenting with AI in production at that company, which was fun. We had some features that now you're seeing startups come out and sell as sort of add-on features for tools like Shopify or BigCommerce or whatever, and Nick was actually building some of those back years ago, which is cool. After that, we actually both went and worked at a company called Artsy, which both of us are pretty proud to have worked at. It's a really cool engineering organization with some awesome engineers. I met some great people there. We had some great mentors and people who challenged us, and got to see sort of the highest end of the tech startup world. And that's really also where Nick was introduced to some AI engineers and some data scientists who are really powerful. Like shout out to Sarah Hack. She's really smart, great person that's been a friend of ours for a while now. So if she happens to be watching this, thanks for all the stuff that you have said in support of us and for your help when we worked at RC, Sarah. So with that context, we went from that to working and building MVPs, basically as an agency for different startups through a friend of ours named Brian Sage at Sage Digital. He also frequently, our third co-founder, Jacob Eubanks, was frequently our design resource for those projects. And then in that relationship, after launching several startups together, Nick kind of brought this product idea to me and asked for my help kind of commercializing it and doing the product discovery and product research to turn it into something we could build a startup around. So I'll hand it off to Nick to talk sort of about his side of how we met, and maybe Grace, you can kind of segue us into the product if you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think you covered everything there, Jacob, from sort of beginning to end. I guess I can just kind of dive into how Ordinal came about, and I guess the story kind of begins with my wife and I wanting to get into real estate investing because she's actually a real estate attorney. We wanted to, we know that there's sort of a housing shortage in Fayetteville, and we felt like, hey, we can kind of help this by doing some infill development. And we knew Fayetteville is kind of a tricky place to develop because they have a very complex development code. But we thought, with experience as a real estate attorney, and then actually her dad, my father-in-law, is a civil engineer for Saline County down in central Arkansas. It was like we can navigate kind of any red tape, and we can make this development happen. And then it took a year to get just a building permit to build on one of the lots that we had purchased.
You initially were going to build 4 houses. What's the plan?
Exactly, yeah. And it was such a frustrating experience because, like, you could feel from the city that they wanted to help us, right? But then there was always this sense that we're kind of like talking past each other, right? And I kind of started to think, well, maybe the problem here is the code itself is very complicated and in fact like contradicts itself in a lot of places. And so I kind of, I dabbled in AI for several years, and I thought this was a really good potential use case here. So I really kind of started just taking all of Fayetteville's unified development code and then processing it in such a way that an LLM can answer questions about it. And it was meant to be more as like, I need answers to my questions, right? And like this way, I can kind of talk to the city in a language that they understand. And then I was like, well, maybe I can productize this. Maybe other people have this. So that's when I reached out to Jacob because he's so fantastic at product discovery and doing those interviews and getting down to the root of what is the actual pain point for people.
That's a perfect segue. And what I would ask you guys next is, you mentioned that this problem started from a very personal point. You wanted to develop, and you kind of built something that would work for you. And now you've kind of moved into software for the government industry. So, what was kind of that aha moment that you realized that there was an opportunity for what you have built, or this product that you started to solve a problem for city governments versus kind of the real estate developers or individuals? Walk through that process and how you landed on there.
Yeah, I think I can answer that pretty succinctly, actually. Which I can also maybe give some advice for anybody who's interested in building products in this space or any other space. When you do product discovery and product research, what you're really trying to figure out is there a functioning business here? Like, people get fixated on the problem, they get fixated on the product. There has to be this underlying business use case. And one of the ways that I learned from a really good book out there called The Mom Test on doing product discovery interviews is finding a way to phrase your questions so that no one can mislead you by being friendly, or no one can kind of put you on a wild goose chase. They have to give you sort of concrete, useful information. So the fastest way to do that is to try to attach the products you're building to a specific problem, and that problem to an amount of money. So when Nick and I were first doing our product discovery, he took me to a lot of his friends through the real estate investing world that were local. And if you know, Northwest Arkansas is kind of a real estate hotbed right now. We're really growing as a native of this region. Like, it has transformed in the last 20 years, and it's going to continue to do that. So Nick is one of the people who's participating in that. And he has a lot of friends in that space. So we took this tool to those people. And as we consistently had these interviews, we sort of heard this feedback like, hey, my business is my relationship with the city. And if I take an AI tool and I kind of slice up the code and I start looking for ways to work around it and whatever else, and making these arguments to help my development projects move faster, then I could be seen as antagonistic by that director of planning or whoever it is in the city. And then now it's going to be really difficult to get my projects to move forward for personal reasons. And that's toxic to those development companies. So they wanted to avoid that outcome and asked us to basically go do that legwork for them to prove that the tool was useful. But the way we knew that this was a business is in that process, while the developers kept giving that feedback, we actually pitched the product at a Golden Corral, like the all-you-can-eat buffet restaurant, which was interesting. But it's where you go if your customers are older retiree investors. Like, that's where they hang out. So that's where we went. And we did a pitch there with like a TV screen in one of the meeting rooms. And I think there were about 12 people in the audience that might have potentially been interested in this tool. We got around half, a little less than half of their credit cards, which is kind of cool, with not a product. We had a PowerPoint where we were just explaining what we were able to do. And we asked this question to come back to that Mom Test book, where we said, hey, can anyone tell me about a specific time where you didn't have this product, and as a result you either lost or made less money, and how much money? And it took like 3 seconds or less for someone to raise their hand and say, $80,000 last year, city of Fayetteville, I had to plant all these trees, I had this land clearing budget. I would have literally just bought a different lot. Like, a different lot would have served for my project. If I had had your tool, I would have been asking questions about that lot. I would have found out how much I'm gonna have to pay to clear land and reforest land. I would have just picked a lot that was either already cleared or somewhere else. And that was the key. We're like, this is worth significant money. We can build a real business because we could have saved that guy $80,000, which means that we can charge $40,000. So that's a really valuable question to suss out: is there a business here? That kind of answers how we validated the market need for this tool. People would spend money to make these processes smoother, like Nick said, to solve that talking past the city and developer. But then we had to find the right customer, and it wasn't actually the developer, because the developer wanted new features. They wanted really in some ways to work antagonistically sometimes with the city. And so we found a better way to do this is to put those two people on sort of the same playing field and align their incentives rather than having them be competitive entities. And so we become, to Nick's point, like a Rosetta Stone, where these entities no longer talk past each other, they talk through Ordinal, which makes it really easy for us to have conversations, and that's going to decrease the friction. So for the developer, it's going to literally be money on the table, where they're going to pay less in interest, they're going to spend less time waiting on things, their projects are going to get reviewed faster, plan review will be faster. And so then we just have to count that once the city has done this, the city has saved money, the city has saved time, the city is more effective, the developer is just going to be more efficient and more effective because they like to make money. Right, and we know real estate developers like to make money, so it's not a big bet. We're just trying to align those incentives that real estate developers investing and growing and making money in towns, and towns having the infrastructure, the resources, and the growth they need, and making those aligned incentives with a piece of technology that makes those people able to work together. It's a long answer, but it really sets the idea of we started with, we knew there was a technological advancement, we knew there was a problem, we found out they could map together, and then we went and looked for the pain point where that became like an adoptable solution to actually address an existing issue rather than just a shiny toy. Nick, do you have anything to add to that, or did I get it all? 'Cause I was pretty far reaching there.
Yeah, no, I think, it's just so like this is kind of what LLMs are really strong at, right? Is translating from one language to another language, or summarizing things. And I think this is such a immediately valuable use case of this technology without like over promising and saying, oh, it can do anything. It can like
Yeah.
replace your entire development team, which there's a
Yeah,
lot of
there's
AI
some
companies out there.
software engineering AI products that are like, you don't need software engineers anymore. And it's like, well, you might have more productive software engineers now, but you really do want someone making sure that what that thing spits out works. And the same thing is true in plan. Like we're not selling an AI planner, right? We're not selling an AI city attorney. We're selling a tool to make those people more effective. And I think that's really important to remember with AI.
So do you think, as you've worked through this, that the cities also really have a lot of investment in building good relationships with development companies, the same way that you guys that from the outset or originally as developers realized that it was important for those development companies to have good relationships with the city? And do you think that Ordinal is really novel or pivotal in kind of bringing those two relationships together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually the goals are really aligned in general between cities and developers, right? And I, it's just they sometimes speak just a little bit of a different language, right? And so if you have that ability to, what is the source of truth, which in this case is the municipal code, and then explain it to both parties in a way that they understand, right? Then we can have the outcome that actually everybody wants at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's also where we realize like it's not just the planning department and builders in the city. It's also like business owners. If I want to open a bar, it's pretty complicated. I'm gonna have to work with the city. If I want to sell alcohol in a retail setting, if I'm at a place where cannabis is legal and I want to open a cannabis related store, if I'm at a place where I want to do something that has to do with outdoor music, or if I want to have indoor music, all these things are complicated for business owners. And so another place we've seen a lot of interest in this is from clerks and people who do like titling and permits and just any kind of like document management over the history of a town, because on some level we started with this Rosetta Stone for developers and planning departments, or planning departments and engineering and building departments who may disagree internally. Also, though, this is a knowledge base because we built on top of that baseline of the ordinances. This is a knowledge base for the whole city. We can put in an employee handbook. We can put in a standard operating procedures. If you have software that has like a wiki or a how-to, we can incorporate that into the knowledge base. We can connect to GIS. That's a big one. So if a city has invested heavily in GIS infrastructure, they've used sort of Esri tools to keep documentation about different lots, different zones, and the data associated with that. At the end of the day, that data is in a computer. So like all data in a computer, like code, websites, whatever, it is text. And we have a large language model, and we are good at ingesting documents into that large language model so we can work with them effectively and has consistent answers that are reliable and trustworthy. Because that's the real differentiator here. I'm sure Nick can dig deep into it, but the real differentiator here is we can consistently say, I know this gets a little bit like there's some debate here, but we can say we have pretty much 100% perfect retrieval accuracy. So some cases the AI, it's not deterministic, so the AI may phrase things differently, so we can't say we know exactly what it will say every time, but we can say that we know exactly what should be in that response. And right now it's always there. And that's mostly Nick's work and the kind of the secret sauce like we mentioned that we have in our document ingestion. But it's key to note this goes way beyond just like planning and developers. That's where the money is on the table, like today. But in a year or two, we're going to be solving problems in probably police and fire, problems in any part of the city where there is technical knowledge and that becomes a bottleneck. This is a solution, and it probably applies to the private industry as well. We're really focused on the city for now, though.
I think then maybe since to take one step back, we started to kind of get into all the value that you guys have, found through the product discovery journey alone. But then maybe let's jump into then what did you actually build from that? So what is the simplest way you can explain how Ordinal works?
Yeah, I would think of it kind of as a librarian, maybe is a good way. Nick can kind of dive into the specifics. There's an architecture pattern called RAG, right, that exists with large language models that a lot of engineers are familiar with. And on some level, this is a RAG application, right? But it's very specialized, and that sort of trick is applying these tools to very specialized cases. And you see that with like agentic AI and stuff too, where the agent is really specialized, but the underlying model may not be. Nick, do you want to add on that?
Yeah, I think yeah, exactly. You hit on RAG. And I think LLMs are incredibly powerful, but if it's an unbounded LLM where it's not attached with RAG or some other paradigm to the source material, there's a I would say the longer the response goes on, the higher the probability is that you're going to have some kind of hallucination, right? Because it's not, you know, without that connection to the source material, or the municipal code, or whatever type of document we're looking at, it's just predicting like what is the next most likely word in this sequence of words. It's not necessarily guaranteeing truth without, and that's what makes the RAG approach so powerful because you're kind of limiting its ability to kind of go off the rails.
Yeah, absolutely. So then kind of, aside from then this tool being a closed source, so, you're getting into this being a knowledge base more so than just a Google search. How else is Ordinal, uniquely different from a lot of the other either current alternatives, the way people are doing this now, or the other municipal code softwares out there? What is Ordinal doing different for these city teams?
I'll split that into like two questions, then give the second one to Nick because it's a little more AI focused. But on the first one, I just want to highlight on like other government technology companies. One of the ones out there, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but one of the ones out there everybody uses is Municode. Municode is a very widespread product. It basically houses your code of ordinances online. In some ways, we look at it and we see, oh, this is basically just like hosting a file on a website for someone. They charge a pretty significant amount of money for that. They charge a lot to like update and improve those codes. They charge you basically for good service. And so we've looked into opportunities basically to take platforms like that and start to incorporate their knowledge into Ordinal and kind of give back to cities in that way, like letting them eliminate line items basically, but also seeing more value for the software they're paying for. So that's a big piece of like the first piece. How do we differentiate from people in the GovTech space? A big key component of this is that we are trying to move into this space without adopting like the bad patterns, the bad habits, and make sure that we have really happy customers. And I don't think that's necessarily true for all government software because they sort of tend to be limited in their options. There's only a few government providers for each area. So that's one piece how we would differentiate from those. But then when we start talking about like AI products, one of the things that people have always been impressed on our product is how consistently we can provide citations and explanations for our answers. And I think that is a key piece. We talked to a principal level engineer at Walmart, which is of course like one of the largest corporations on earth, so they have sort of infinite resources when it comes to technology. And that engineer talked about trying to build basically the same thing in-house and really struggling to get the level of consistency we did. And I think that's a great segue into like why we're different than an off-the-shelf model like ChatGPT, where you might build a custom GPT. Just because you've given those documents to a GPT and you're talking to it does not mean you are getting answers from that document, and you're definitely not getting answers solely from that document. So Nick can talk about the technical limitations of like trying to do a custom GPT or something versus what we do, but that would be my answer.
Yeah, no, I think that summarizes it super well. And I'm not sure what the second question that you were going to pass off to me.
Yeah, that was it.
The,
Let's like if I was going to set up a custom chat GPT, like custom GPT, and I put my town's unified development code into it, like why is that
Mhm.
worse than Ordinal?
Yeah, I mean, because for one thing, like there's with context windows, you're always, at least with the way the technology kind of currently works, you're going to be very much limited to like summarizing just a few pages from that, and it's going to confidently answer like, oh yeah, absolutely, it's this, that, and the other, and that doesn't really work if you're you know if answer fidelity is so important, which it is in this industry, right? Because people are making big money decisions on this, right? And obviously, like this is a very serious thing, right? That this is the government, going about its business. Which, as a total aside from this, but I really love that we're getting to help municipal governments because I don't think people appreciate just how important in their lives like that the municipality kind of functioning well is. And everybody gets really focused on like sort of what's happening at the national scale, but actually like what matters more for your day-to-day life and is your municipal government, like getting those potholes fixed and all the million little ways that they're sort of ingrained into your life. And so, like helping them, we're helping a lot more people.
Yeah, it's super exciting to see that this can kind of also just build trust and confidence within city teams and then within cities, and that kind of multiplies out while also making a more efficient government, right? So that's exciting. Nick, if you'll kind of outline then maybe the top three best features of Ordinal that serve cities, like what do they get out of it for the top three reasons?
Sure. So I think one, basically not having to manage like all of these documents, right? You can just kind of give us like every single, master street plan, your development codes, your design standards, everything, and then we can ingest all of that and then give you holistic answers across multiple sources, right? And then, make sure they're nuanced answers so that if there is some kind of contradiction between your design standard and your master street plan, we can surface that for you, right? And say, okay, well, this says this. And I think in the longer term, I think we can even help cities eliminate those contradictions and just improve the clarity, right? Which is going to be beneficial for the city and beneficial for all of the constituents. Then other features, I think, our GIS integrations are super cool and beneficial to cities because we can give address-specific answers about, various like zoning or anything like that. And then I think one, I don't know if we should talk about future features in this, but our email integration is something I'm very, very excited about.
Yeah, so I would kind of put those into a couple big buckets. Is like centralization of knowledge is one, like and removal of knowledge silos. We didn't really talk about this in this conversation, but like the idea that if you do have somebody who's worked at your city for 30 years and they are near retirement, when they leave, you might lose all of that institutional knowledge. But if they were documenting things, if you have their email history, if you have these kind of tools that let you get a picture of how they worked and what they knew, we can load that stuff into Ordinal, and then now you kind of retain that institutional knowledge. So I would say centralization, like knowledge retention, like knowledge management is one big bucket. That also includes like training new staff. It's a huge cost. We think it takes like 6 months to hire a new planner. It takes like 6 months to train a planner. This tool cuts that timeline down a lot. I would say another example is like dissemination of information. So we can talk about like keeping information like consistent and manageable, but then also being able to give it to people on your staff, like your front desk team. With Ordinal, we give unlimited license to our customers. So it's like if you want to give this to all your part-time employees, so they no longer call your directors for feedback. But they can answer simple questions. That's great. And that's the other big one is going to be like kind of like what Nick was pointing to is future-facing opportunities for efficiencies. There's a huge amount of efficiency in just this as a training tool and like all those things. But then there's a lot of opportunities for efficiency on top of the knowledge base for building new features, like what Nick is talking about, where you basically have an assistant that helps you manage your email inbox. If you're a planner, like one we know in one of our customer cities that gets 300 emails a week or a day, even sometimes code questions, you might want that AI copilot in your inbox helping you write those responses. So that's one of the things Nick's pointing out. But there's going to be things that help city attorneys, things that help, police, fire, like those other areas of the city. And the key right now is getting people onto the platform so they can give us that feedback so we can build the right things going forward, because we really need those experts like in the room who have worked in these cities, because it's a really, really specialized skill set and not many people have it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, what is something that you've learned from the city managers and the planning directors you've interacted with throughout this journey? So, clearly, you're starting to continue to get feedback. That's what you're looking for. What are the major learnings from that so far?
I have an interesting one. So, there's a big push for government efficiency in the coming year. Like everyone's kind of aware of that. Something I've learned going into these cities, there's this assumption that they're not efficient, and I think there are opportunities for improvement all over. Like there's a lot. Like for example, in the specific space we're in, there's a lot of wasted communication, a lot of documentation that's probably overly verbose and hard to navigate. Like those are opportunities for improvement. But frequently, these organizations aren't inefficient because of any like necessary mistake they've made or any flaw that they have as like individuals who are working in these organizations, which I think is the assumption a lot. But the actual inefficiency problem, I think, comes from trying to kind of be beholden to all these different stakeholders and all these different people that are trying to get answers out of you. And I think when I start to look at the dynamics of that, I realize one, city planners are probably some of the most important people in the city, that I wasn't quite as aware like how important they are. And then two, that the solution to these problems really isn't to like cut people or to make things like leaner. Like that's really not the problem. The problem for the most part is that there's too much throughput. And if we were to go out and hire 6 more planners, every city would be better off actually. But that's just not feasible, right? And so that's what I've learned, is that it's not really about cutting for efficiency. It's also not really, there's really not the resources to just throw money at problems in these spaces. So I think it's seeing the scrappiness and like the effectiveness that's already there working under those resource constraints, but then looking for opportunities to alleviate the resource constraints, which I think when we first started this, my thought was, oh, we'll just make them get back to emails faster because they're slow at getting back to emails. But you dig into it and you realize it's a very complicated issue and you have to chip away at like piece by piece.
That's a perfect point to kind of what I would say, what I would ask next of like, then what have you seen from, what are the characteristics of innovative cities, or what are the aspects that you all believe are necessary to see the future of city growth?
Oh, the easy one out of the gate is a decisive executive. Cities that have jumped on this opportunity and gotten prices that we're not going to give anybody else because they're willing to work with us at this stage and give us the feedback we need. It's because an executive said, all right, we're doing that. Like that's a good idea. I see where it's going. We're doing that. And it's also understanding that, like, yes, AI is in a hype cycle. Yes, there are people online promising that AI is going to fix everything and replace everybody and do everything ever. That is probably not true. Those people are overhyping their products. But there is something in this technological movement that's really big and new, especially in user interface, right? We're going into a space that people would call a dusty industry with a brand new, shiny piece of technology. And the way we're doing that is because that specific piece of technology allows us to build an interface that's as simple as Facebook Messenger. So if you have people on your city staff who are averse to learning technology, but they have a Facebook account and they use Facebook Messenger, then they can use Ordinal. And that's kind of, I would say that's something that is really interesting about aligning sort of the technological advancement with the opportunity in the market. So I think people would be afraid to try to modernize this space, but I actually think because LLMs are so accessible, it's actually way easier to do right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting because ordinarily when you think like technological advancement, that you're, leaving some group of people behind, right? That they're not going to be able to kind of keep up. But this technology actually brings more people in. It makes technology like more accessible to, a greater group of people, which is awesome, and I think we very much view it, not only is it, integral to the product in terms of like what it's doing, but it's also like the presentation layer, and integrating AI deeply into that as well is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What has been some challenges you've ran into? Because as you mentioned, clearly some people think that, oh, they're going to be left behind, or like they have this idea that AI will take over everyone's jobs, or that AI is not meant for me as someone who's in the city government because we haven't done this XYZ before. So what are some of those challenges with getting a city to adopt AI, and how have you kind of been overcoming that, or how do you propose some cities to overcome that?
Yeah, if you want to like just kind of prep yourself for it, the first thing is to just define what your relationship with it's going to be. Some cities have policies that are like, don't touch that, which I think is a little bit naive. And then some cities have a policy which is like, we're going to buy every AI thing on the market, which I think is also a little bit naive. So having kind of that policy on how you're going to have a relationship with AI, how you plan to sort of upskill your team. A really big component of this that we bring that I think people are missing is that this is a new paradigm to learn. It is not hard to learn, but there are tricks, there are things that you are going to miss. Like Nick said, if you go into ChatGPT, create a custom GPT and put your town's ordinances in there, what you have done, the big advancement with LLMs, really, if you think about it on some level, is kind of like the Turing test. And I'm sure there are like PhDs who will just throw what I'm about to say out the window and correct me a lot. But the Turing test, right, the idea is basically that Alan Turing, I think, is who it's named for, so I assume he came up with it, is that if I had a computer behind a door and it could pass notes underneath the door, could it lie to you and convince you it's a human? Well, LLMs can do that. Like we did that. That's what those do. They're computers that can lie, right? And that's pretty scary. Like we made a computer that can put words together. It doesn't know it's lying. It has no idea what lying is. It's just picking the next most likely word. It just happens that those words together are not true. And I think that's a situation that we really want to avoid. And with Ordinal, we have this opportunity to like kind of educate people on how to basically constrain these large language models so they are predictable, they are accurate, they are reliable. So that's a big thing that I think has been a resistance as people have gone out and used ChatGPT. They've put their ordinance into ChatGPT. They have 5 or 10 lines of their ordinance, maybe 5 or 10 pages that are in this ChatGPT's context window, and now you've created a super good liar. you've created someone who is so good at lying to you about your specific document. And like that's really scary. If you've done that 2 or 3 times and you've gotten burned by it, then you don't want anything to do with this technology. So you need someone like us basically to come in and give you that tool with guardrails so that you aren't going to hurt yourself and you are going to get that benefit of AI without the risk. I think that's the thing I've learned is that there's a big aversion to the dangers of AI, and people, I think, aren't yet informed that experts on this technology can solve those issues. What do you think, Nick? Anything else that we've like learned? It's been
Yeah, no,
difficult.
I agree with a lot of that. I think, the Turing test in particular, like it was used as like this metric for is this if we created something that's sort of self-aware, right? And by but really that's more of a test of people's propensity to ascribe, human-like qualities to an inanimate object, right? And I saw this great, like little example of it where a guy put like googly eyes on a pencil, and he's like, "This is Mr. Pencil," and then you gave like a whole like backstory, and then he breaks the pencil in half, and three-quarters of the audience is like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
like super
oh my
attached to the
gosh."
pencil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right. And I think it's a very human thing to do to want to ascribe sentience to kind of everything, but that isn't a real measure of like, is this thing actually self-aware, right? So, but I don't, all credit to Alan Turing. I'm not dissing Alan Turing because I'm a huge fan.
No, I mean, I think that feeling is maybe the number one obstacle to adoption is like a little bit of a fear. But once people are willing to learn, and especially like with our growth and sales team, like we're making a really strong effort. Like those people are taking AI certifications, even though they're not engineers. They're just sales folks and project management type folks and sort of semi-technical, technical adjacent people who have worked in software companies or around software. And we're just kind of training them up to be AI experts because when they go into these cities, it's like what we need to do is basically introduce the concept, acknowledge the fear, and then kind of train people on how to use this new paradigm so that those fears, I mean, if you go into an Excel spreadsheet, you can accidentally, change a number in a column and make your, end of year financial statements say numbers that are very wrong and get yourself in big hot water because you made a typo in Excel. It's the same. Like this is a tool where you could make a mistake and you could get yourself into hot water, but if you know how to use it the way that CPAs know how to use Excel, you're probably not going to do that. And that's kind of the trick is we need to get people in place that have that skill set and are experts in this role. And then we see our role as like in this specific space in local government, regional government, and maybe some agencies where it makes sense. We go in and we help those people adopt these tools, get 80% of the value, the 80-20, you get 80% of what you get out of AI. Don't spend your time trying to capture that last 20%. That's not really going to help you, and that's where all the pitfalls are. So we can kind of give you that out of the box thing, and I think it's all about educating people that this is safe as long as you do it the right way. And you need to find like trustworthy partners who can set up an AI system for you, and not necessarily. And this isn't to diss all the people who are like AI hackers. I'm a self-taught computer scientist. Like, I think hacking's great. If you are someone though who's like hacking together, AI systems right now, and you're just like some dude in your basement who's figuring this out from YouTube videos, you can get really far. But there are some pitfalls that we are not, as a community, as AI technologists, aware of yet. That you really need an expert to come in and say, hey. You wouldn't expect it, it's counterintuitive, but here, and here, you need to tell your AI to behave differently, or you need to make sure that you have done this, as Nick said, in your document ingestion, make sure you have included this metadata and you have tagged these key attributes and things like that. Those steps aren't things people without AI expertise are gonna know. And so for the next 10 years, while we're building that muscle, we need to make sure there are always AI experts in the room, and that there are also always humans in the room. There's like the two components. You need an AI expert who is helping you build these systems so you're not doing the things that we all are now learning you should not do. And then the other piece is you want to make sure that you have an expert. So in our case, it's usually city planners, city attorneys, city managers. You want that expert in the room to review what the AI does. And so the key piece for us, we have an internal research tool. We do not sell a public-facing chatbot. We may one day, we may turn some of these features public-facing to help the city if that really is going to help them. But in a lot of cases, turning a tool like this public-facing is just going to create more work for those same people. And we look for opportunities to solve problems with AI rather than create new ones. And I think that would be a big value add. And something I would warn anybody watching this, I would just warn you, absolutely go explore all the AI products, try to hack together your systems, build them. But when it comes time to put those into production and start working with your actual constituency, your actual citizens in your community, make sure that you are working with at least one expert on how that should be configured. And then don't let that expert kind of off the hook. If that AI is not performing how they said it would, there's a good chance that they are misleading you on their expertise.
That's some really good thoughts on kind of how some government should go forward. And clearly outline that there is still a lot of skepticism in the industry, specifically in government. So then, on the same hand, or on the flip side, I guess, we internally have talked about, out of Y Combinator, they're announcing that government software is going to be the largest industry in the upcoming years, and this is where startups should be working in. So, what do you guys think is the value of bringing software to government, and how do you guys see that expanding and overcoming this hurdle of skepticism and dealing with some of these systems that may be even behind some of our more corporate or retail systems?
Yeah, so I have like two good answers to that. So one is we do need to look at like the tried and true methodology. So like I worked at Walmart, Nick worked at Artsy, I worked at Artsy. Like we worked at these companies that have been doing AI stuff for a while now. We need to look at what is like super safe, super repeatable, tried and true, the best practices that those organizations have learned over the last 5 years or so, and then bring those into the space. So that's one big value add is that we bring over things that are already tested, already validated, and we put them into this space rather than trying to invent new things here, where the risks are pretty high. You talk about like the law and to Nick's point, real estate investment, and these things where the side effects of doing a bad job are pretty measurable and pretty serious. So it's important that we do a good job, and I think that comes from, like you said, those retailers, people like that who have been doing AI stuff for a while, pulling that knowledge into this space. That's one big value add. And then the other one, I think, there's obviously the federal pressure that's happening with the new administration that's coming in, and all the rhetoric that we're seeing around efficiency. Well, there's kind of two sides to that sword. One is that like as we cut and we make things more efficient in terms of our spend, we're going to see a little bit of a ding. Like it's impossible to avoid in terms of services rendered, right? So if you cut a program, then people aren't getting that program. Same thing's true where if if you're cutting employees and you're trying to save money on payroll, well, you're losing that knowledge. Like there are downsides to this. Cuts and efficiency always have a negative side effect as well as the positive one you're seeking. One of the big ones that we're going to see in government over the next probably 4 years, as we see a lot of this government efficiency stuff take shape and effect, you will lose a lot of institutional knowledge. People will be walking out the door, people will be retiring and not be replaced. Things like this will happen, and those people will not most likely find a good vehicle for putting their institutional knowledge back in the hands of the institution they're leaving. Ordinal is a super good solution to that. So if you are in one of those positions where you can see a lot of institutional knowledge leaving your organization, then you can set Ordinal up, start incorporating that institutional knowledge into Ordinal before you lose that knowledge. And then, say your budget does get halved and you do lose some of your staff, you still will be able to operate and deliver those services on a higher level than if you had the staff cut and lost the knowledge. So I would say that's a really topical value add for this specific tool going into what I suspect, I think most people suspect, is going to be like a season of efficiency for government, federal and regional and local.
Very well said.
Thanks.
Well, then maybe moving back to Ordinal, can you guys share a success story or something that you guys are proud of from the journey so far?
I would say, like for me, Nick can add one too, but I think for me the one is just that when we do product demos, there's an emotional reaction. It's like having been a product manager, having been a software engineer at startups, like a lot of times people do not get excited about what you're building. And when you are building a product, you kind of either want in that demo call where you ask for feedback, you want someone to like light up with like rejoice and joy. Or you want someone to like get angry at you. Like that's really what you want, because if you have those reactions, that means you're touching a nerve. So right now, when we demo, generally for like a director of planning or someone who's in that role that receives a lot of questions and has to have this knowledge in their brain, there's that sort of feeling of rejoicing and like, oh man, this problem is solved for me. I think that's like the number one like success story for me personally as an entrepreneur, as a product manager, as a software engineer, is to build something where people are physically reacting when they see it. And then there's it's a whole different story, like navigating the city to make a sale. But we always do that process with like strong advocates, and that would be there's someone in the city who's like telling their boss, buy this or I quit, sort of thing. Almost every time we make a sale, someone in the city is really dedicated to our product, and that's a really good feeling.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. It's very gratifying to work. The people have such a strong emotional reaction to the product, which is not always the case, right? Some of the other companies that we've been at in the past. So it's really cool to see that, and then to know that like by helping this group of people, you're helping like a much larger group of people. It feels kind of like a sort of force multiplier, which is great because at the end of the day, you want to have a great impact, a positive impact in the world, and I think this is a great way to do it.
Yeah. So what does the future look like then for Ordinal? Where are you kind of moving into? What's that big picture vision that you really want to tackle?
Yeah, Nick mentioned the sort of email feature that we're building. So there's a bunch of those little features that I'll call them little, but they're big game changers. There's a bunch of features that are tacked on top of this knowledge base, and that's why we start with the knowledge base. Once we have this platform that really knows the city, then we take that knowledge and we attack that city's problems. So in the case of Lowell, Arkansas is one of our customers. That town is fat. It's like very fast growing. They just for the first time hired a full-time planner because they had to, because there's so many businesses coming in, and that planner is swamped by emails asking nuanced, hard questions that take hours to answer. So giving that person an email co-pilot that can sort of write the first draft, and then that planner can come in and say, I like that one, I don't like that one. She can edit this, or she can send that one. Those are like features we're really excited about. We have those in the email space, but also sort of in like the knowledge management space. We have some things coming up that we're looking at to make our integration stronger with different platforms. There's a lot in the works. We're getting a lot better at ingesting documents, so it'll get to a point where as people give us more and more knowledge, they give us documents in different formats, like pictures of stuff in their archive basement. We might be able to get that into Ordinal much, much faster. That's a really cool thing on the roadmap. But I think if I look at what are we trying to become, I tell people a lot of times in sales pitches, like what we are showing you is super valuable and super useful, but you have to understand from a technologist perspective, that is a rubber duck. We are selling you a rubber duck, and in 2 years we want you to be on a battleship. So it's like, it's super valuable. It does float, but we need to turn it into something that like really blows you out of the water. So I think that's kind of where we're at. We're looking at how do we become that whole operating system for a city? How do we become we don't want to necessarily replace your permits platform or have you re-platform onto something that's going to be a huge ask of your city's resources, but we do want that kind of like one click, a key turn, and now you have all the basic AI systems that you're going to want. You're able to write social media posts easily. You're able to write a zoning verification letter easily. You're able to incorporate a map and ask for analysis and do site reports easily. Like these kind of things that we just do all day, every day in cities, and end up costing a lot, and sometimes are that blocker that kind of clogs the bottleneck. Those tasks should be more and more automated, so that the people who are working in those roles are orchestrating the software a lot more than they are having to do the grunt work.
Absolutely. I think it's very well said. One, feature I'm super excited about is, our sort of multimodal future, right? Where we're able to, analyze a potential development submission, right? And point out, okay, here are the things that, you should take a look at that need to be improved, right? And so it's just this, massive productivity boost for the planners and,
Yeah,
in the city.
like
And
how
then
much
also,
faster would it be if a plan review came in half done, right?
exactly, right? Um, So yeah, I think there's so many cool things I'm excited to work on for the future of Ordinal, and yeah,
Yeah. As someone who's sitting on a couple demos, I know that they're excited about the planning review stuff. I think that'll be a great feature. So, is there anything else that you guys would like to specifically share to our listeners about Ordinal?
I mean, right now, the key thing to focus on is we're looking for partners, or not going to be, sorry, organizations, I guess municipal companies, municipal corporations, but cities, towns, regions, agencies, anybody who is in a government role, who employs some number of experts, and those experts are sort of overwhelmed with an influx of asks on their time and their knowledge. That's kind of where we sit. So we're looking for people who have that problem, which is most cities in America, small town to big city. Some of our customers have a population of 3,000, some have a population of 200,000. So it's like finding that common problem they all have. If someone has that problem, then that would be the time to like reach out to us, because it's the cheapest to get this kind of solution. Like we have quoted these solutions as contractors in the past, building RAG systems, LLM systems. If you are lucky, like if you have a friend, building something that like this would probably cost you, I mean, $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000, maybe more, and you're going to get it in a year or two. And we're trying to onboard towns that want to get it for a percentage of that in 2 weeks from the point when they sign the contract. That's sort of our promise. So that's what I would share with anybody curious at Ordinal, is like the stage in this product's life is we're looking for those adopters who are ready to get ahead sort of the other cities, who want to beat the 2025 efficiency push, and then we're looking to give them deals because they're going to give us that feedback and help us build what we sell to the other 20,000 towns in America and the other countries that we'll probably break into in the future.
Right. Awesome. Well, we're coming up on a close here, but I will ask, what has been, the main difference between launching BreakGround, between both of your guys' previous entrepreneurial endeavors? Like, give us some insight on back kind of on you two.
Yeah, it's definitely the product feedback. But Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's, started with the biggest industry in this and like other, ventures I've sort of started as, previously, like I get really excited about the technology, right? And then kind of look for an application. And this time, I wanted to start, looking for like what is like super painful and then like what is the technology that is can be applied to this and suits that. So I would say, just from my personal experience, like that's been, made it a much more smoother experience, at least.
Yeah, definitely. You don't have to. We don't have to shine our product very much because the problem it's addressing is very real. Like it doesn't need to be, you know. I would say a lot of software demos, for example, in startups, you'll see people will do kind of a wired demo where it's like, this isn't real software. I'm clicking on a mock or I'm on a website where like it never breaks. But like when we do our demo, we just log in because like it is actually, even if it did break on the demo, it probably wouldn't matter as long as it was delivering the answers because that's so valuable. And that's the result of like focusing on the expensive hard problem rather than the shiny solution. It just happens the timing is right that this shiny solution does help us solve that hard problem.
That's great. Well, last question for today. How can the attendees or folks who rewatch this webinar get in touch with either of you?
I'm super accessible on LinkedIn. Like, that's a really fast way to get a hold of me. I have a Blue Sky account. I don't use it very much, but I have one. I would recommend everybody just kind of reach out through LinkedIn or our website, ordinalforgov.com. That's a really fast way to request a demo. And if you can't get in touch with me, which I'm sure you can if you reach out, I'm super accessible. We also have like some other folks on LinkedIn, like McCall Delaney or Jeff Hoffman or Chris Simmons. These are all people that are going to be posting about our product, and you can connect with them. We'll happily set you up with a demo. They're all on our growth team. I think also I would definitely encourage people to check out the other content we've done. We've done a few conference talks, things like that, and we'll keep doing that. So that'll be a good way to get your eyes on what we're doing, maybe without having to get one of us on a call.
Nick, any specific way to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn's probably the best way to get in touch with me as well. I'm not quite as much as a power user as Jacob is, but I will respond if you reach out to me on LinkedIn.
That's great. All right, guys, thank you so much for sitting down and sharing all those thoughts. It was super interesting and informational, and I know that we're excited to get more content out about Ordinal and about your guys' story. So that's all the questions we do have for today. As previously mentioned, if you are interested in getting in touch with either Nick or Jacob, we'll attach their contact info, their LinkedIn profiles in the comments. And additionally, if you are interested in learning more about Ordinal, you can fill out the form on this QR code or in the chat, and one of our team members will be quick to reach out. So thanks again for everyone who joined this afternoon and for helping us spread the word on Ordinal.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.